I'm just going to dive straight in. The approach I take to religious studies is called the phenomenological approach, and it's sometimes called methodological agnosticism because it doesn't try to decide whether the truth or not of somebody's claims. Ninian Smart is one of the experts in this area, and for him, he says, God is real for Christians whether he exists or not. So I understood, it was just like an epiphany around this time last year, and I understood I could use that approach in relation to gender identity. Gender identity is real for people who believe in it, whether it exists or not. Now, I had done lots of research on religion. I've been to, mosques, pagan festivals, synagogues, done many, many Holocaust study trips. And I essentially came to the realization when this was a belief system, which I had heard people speaking about before, but now I was able to compare it to the other religions that I had, explored and different festivals and everything. The difference, of course, that is that everybody must believe. Non-believers are heretics, and even questions are unacceptable. This was a new experience for me. Even when I fasted for Ramadan, I fasted for the entire month of Ramadan one year, and a Muslim missionary from Tablighi Jamaat called me to Islam. I met him for coffee in a mosque in Dublin, and he said, it's my duty to call you to Islam. And I politely declined. I accepted, it was a very generous offer on his part. He was doing what he thought was, the best thing he could give me. We continued talking. It was all very pleasant, it was still friendly. But with this belief system, that doesn't happen. Today's talk is an elaboration of an article that I wrote for the Irish Times last year. It had been accepted, it had been filed for publication, and I was told it would be in print on Monday, the 25th of April. It never appeared. The man who had accepted my pitch and thanked me for the article and actually told me in advance, you have your friends and family ready on Monday because there's going to be a negative response here. And he texted me that morning. He said, I have no idea why it didn't appear. This is really unusual. Nobody consulted me. So that was called A New Religion. And it went online and it got a great response. And since then, I've been researching the topic more. And as I was researching, I came across a book by a man called A. James Gregor, and it was on political religions. And I was reading that and I was like, that's what we're dealing with here. So James Gregor is Professor Emeritus of Political Science at the University of California in Berkeley. He wrote about political religions in the 20th century, which, although considered secular in character, contain religious properties: fanaticism, intolerance, and irrationality. So today I'm going to start by talking, why do I use the term ideology? This time last year I was calling it gender identity theory, not ideology. But the more I read about ideology, the more I thought that's what we're dealing with. So I'm going to start with looking at why I'm calling it ideology. Then I'm going to look at why I'm calling it a religion, and then why I'm calling it a political religion. And I'm going to end, if I have time, at looking at transhumanism, and which is actually a trans religion, and it looks at God is technological, is one of the key ideas. The philosopher Hannah Arendt wrote that an ideology is not simply an opinion. An ideology offers a claim to truth. Although ideologies pretend to be scientific philosophy, ideological thinking, says Arendt, becomes emancipated from reality, the reality that we perceive with our five senses. Gregor, the man who I'm going to be drawing a lot on his work today, he points out that if ideological claims to truth are falsified, this doesn't necessarily result in the renunciation of the ideology. Another point he makes is that ideologues will try and avoid and obstruct attempts to determine the truth or falsity of their claims, and will reject standard procedures of confirming or disconfirming claims. I have loads of pages, but don't worry, I'm not reading them all. Ideologies have religious elements, and they involve moral judgments and normative claims. They determine people and behaviours as good or bad, righteous or evil. The claims are often emotive in nature, and people are deemed as heroes or monsters. allies, or bigots. Another point to remember, that was just my idea. Another point to remember is that the principal function of an ideology is to inspire action to change the world. Gender identity is presented as a scientific truth, while at the same time open discussion and debate is obstructed all the time. Evidence that potentially contradicts claims is disregarded or ignored. There is a division of people into angels and demons. There is an aim to change the world under the banner of the gospel of truth of equality, diversity, and inclusion. To move on to religion then, even religious scholars don't agree on how to define religion. Even international human rights documents that set out rights to religious freedom don't define religion. There's a tendency these days to call lots of things religions. The philosopher Roger Scruton said human rights are a religion. One article in the National Geographic in 2016 had the title, "The World's Newest Major Religion? No Religion." Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek has said that wokeness operates as a secularized religious dogma. I mean, there's more and more. One academic wrote a paper of New Zealand rugby as a religion. And just to make the point that religion is often used as a kind of a pejorative term. You know, something is a religion, therefore it's bad. But religions actually give people lots of positive things too. They give meaning and purpose. There's charitable activities. They set up organizations. I mean, if you look in Ireland, lots of schools and medicine, even though, you know, the Catholic Church is really, we've moved away from it and it's regarded negatively for a lot of people, it gave a lot as well, which is often overlooked. This event today could be called religious. Here I am on the pulpit, and you're the congregation listening to my sermon. My point is that, you know, you can call anything a religion, really. You can argue. One article published in an academic journal in the 1950s is a very famous article called "The Body Ritual Among the Nakarima." And it was about a North American group called the Nakarima, whose fundamental belief was that the human body is ugly and that its tendency towards death and disease could be averted through magical rituals and ceremonies conducted in household shrines. It transpired that the paper was satirical. Nakarima is American backwards. The household shrine was the toilet, or a restroom, you call it in America, and the magical rituals were brushing teeth and taking medicines or pills. So the point here is that, like, that's an outsider perspective. So when you're an outsider looking at a religion, you can misinterpret actions and rituals. Like, what we can say, oh, this is religion. When it comes to gender identity, I want to acknowledge that I am an outsider. It kind of reminds me of a time when I did a radio program with a Scientologist, and he said to me, he thought I was a practicing Catholic, and he said, "You think we're strange, don't you? You think we're weird. But look at you. You go to Mass every Sunday and eat the body and blood of a man who died 2,000 years ago." So that, I think, illustrates the point of the outsider perspective. And I'm going to use the outsider perspective now to show what I think are parallels between gender ideology and religion. One of the ways of looking at religions from a religious studies perspective is in terms of key characteristics, like a family that has characteristics. All religions won't have the same characteristics. Not all religions have a God, for example. So I'm just going to go through some of these. First of all, sense of community. There's a sense of community. People are linked through national, international organizations and lobby groups that reinforce bonds and connections and provide shared symbols. The organizations, I would argue, can be compared to churches, with community hubs providing information and support, key people as, we could call them, prophets, priests, gurus, giving outreach sermons via diversity and inclusion training workshops. The main symbol comes in the form of flags that have been imbued with sacredness and operate as a sort of a totem, invested with an aura that requires respect. The sociologist, even though I'm coming at it from a phenomenological perspective, I'm using some sociological theories here as well. So the sociologist Emile Durkheim believed that the totem symbolizes the totemic principle, which is the invisible, unseen force worshipped by the religious clan or group, and the totem reinforces devotion. So what is the totem? When it comes to gender ideology, I would argue that it is gender identity. It's an invisible, unseen force. And it's comparable to the idea of a soul. It requires a faith. It's divorced from matter. Gender identity is divorced from matter. It's metaphysical. It's you cannot experience it with your senses. There is also what could be compared to a liturgical calendar. Dates mark remembrance events, sacred times set apart from the profane. The idea of the sacred and the profane, again, is Durkheim and it's other anthropologists of religion. So sacred is set apart, it's special. Profane is normal, everyday, mundane. So the liturgical calendar would have, obviously, Pride Month, Transgender Day Awareness Week, Transgender Day of Remembrance, and Trans Day of Visibility. Speaking about biological sex or questioning gender identities during these times in particular is considered taboo. As we know in Ireland from the RTE Liveline shows when all hell broke loose when he discussed gender identity during Pride Month. RTE haven't covered the topic since. So Durkheim wrote about the importance of religious ceremonial occasions when the person loses themselves in the clan. This can be seen in the Pride Parade, in particular when individuals merge as one into the clan, reinforcing group identity. Those with gender identities announce pronouns, have pronouns in email signatures. Somebody referred to it yesterday as pronoun ritual. And I've read somebody referring to it as prayer. For Durkheim, I've mentioned about the sacred, but I would say that gender identities, including non-binary, genderqueer, transgender, and gender fuck, I just wanted to say that, would be considered like sacred and sacred, whereas cis-heteronormativity, profane, boring, mundane, everyday. Coming out as transitioning is the idea of being born again. So, in the Eastern religions, reincarnation, and new body, new name also can be linked to conversion. Instead, there's the transubstantiation, not of bread and wine into body and blood, but of human sex changing from male to female or female to male. Doctors are the medicine men. They're the saviors prescribing hormones. There are mantras, ritual incantations, chants, dogma. There's a moral system. It says, who's good to hang around with, who's bad, what's the good thing to say, to not say. Those who engage in immoral deeds, such as misgendering, heretics, blasphemers. The sins of non-compliance can result in the harem being invoked. The harem is a Jewish idea. And that great philosopher, I can't think of his name now, Amsterdam. Anybody think of his name? Spinoza, yes, the harem was invoked. He was cast out from the community. The harem is invoked. And when the harem is invoked, it is the scapegoat. You're creating the scapegoat. The scapegoat carries the sins of the community out from the community. So, and I'm going to finish with not just this section. I have another thing I want to get to. But this is the most radical idea I have. So I'm just testing the water with this. James George Fraser is one of the most important theorists on myth and religion. And he wrote a book called The Golden Bough. It took him 25 years. It's written in a series of volumes. But he said, he recorded that some clans eat their sacred totem as a way of ingesting the sacred principle or the divine. Do you know where I'm going with this? Will I just leave it there? So, the totemic principle in gender ideology is gender identity, and it's taken into the body in form of hormones. It is a form of technology as well. So now I just want to mention the political religion aspect of it. If I just read out one or two quotes from Gregor, he points out that while traditional religions saw political power as coming from a divine source and truth as revealed by a transcendent God, political religions recognized other sacralized bases of power. The state, a class, a race, or history are examples. Now he wasn't talking about gender identity. I drew this analogy. He said that Marxists, National Socialists, Fascists, followers of Pol Pot and Maoists all behaved as though in possession of a divinely revealed truth and as though communicants of a faith. In gender ideology, gender identity is the sacralized base of power and is treated as though it is a divinely revealed truth. Political religions, according to Gregor, rarely, if ever, concede difficulties in establishing the truth of their most fundamental claims. They treat anybody who doesn't go with it as, having, it's a moral infraction if you don't do it. He said, adherence, the similarities, when I was reading this, it's like, it's not good that I saw this. I don't think it's not a good thing. I don't think that it's a political religion. He said adherents of political religions exhibited features of religious intolerance, tended to recommend, advocate, prescribe, and command behaviours. I want to get on to terrorism, so I'm going to skip the next bit. But remember that politics is about allocation of rights, resources, and it's about changing laws. So there are all of those exist within the gender movement. Denton's document, Yoga Carta principles, I can't get into them, but I just want to get to transhumanism. Gender identity ideology has already been made into an official religion. The Terrorism Movement Foundation has its headquarters in Vermont. It's part of the transhumanist movement. Terrorism was founded by Martine and Bina Rothblatt. And it includes the terrorism movement, trans religion. That's what they call it. I'm not giving it that name. And the belief that nanotechnology and cyber consciousness have the potential to relieve human suffering and extend human life. Suffering and death, of course, are key ideas in all of the world religions and how to deal with them. The terrorism faith has an anthem. This is on the website. Everybody can read it. It has an anthem, and it has what I would consider to be a kind of a sacred text. It's written in chapter verse format, very cleverly done, actually. And I'll just give you an idea of that. 1.1.3 is conformity in allegiance to terrorism is the most enjoyable and most useful way of life. Martine Rothblatt, who underwent male-to-female sex reassignment surgery in 1994 and was key in the movement to change the focus from the medical model to the rights model in around 1994, wrote this book, From Transgender to Transhuman. It's the second version of a book that had been published but it's more expanded. So I just want to give you an idea of some of the ideas in that book. Rothblatt writes that genitals are as irrelevant to one's role in society as skin tone, that humans need not have a flesh body, just as a woman need not have a real vagina, and that software and robots should have human rights. It makes sense that the journalist Jennifer Bilek refers to gender ideology as a techno-religion. Rothblatt argues that prisons... so this is where I think we are going. I think this is like the guidebook, and I think... it is the bigger picture as far as, from a religious, looking at it from this religious perspective. Rothblatt argues that prisons, athletic competitions, and public facilities such as washrooms do not need to be segregated by sex, that the government should not collect sex information. And somebody mentioned earlier about birth certificates. That's in that book, From Transgender to Transhuman, that that birth certificates should not record sex. Also, you'll see this everywhere, the genderbread person. Sex and gender are continuums, and that female and male terminology should be abolished. Rothblatt writes, "We owe it to the children of tomorrow to free their minds from a linguistic prison of sex." Many of the goals, aims, and ideas outlined in From Transgender to Transhuman are apparent in drives today across the world, including in hate speech laws. So you can see where we're heading. Gender recognition acts, I would argue, are only the beginning. I think that's small fry. And these are some of the directions that I would argue is a secular transhumanist political religion might be heading next. I want to briefly sign off with the point that while I've argued that gender ideology is a political religion, there are religious characteristics that are absent in gender ideology. I would argue, now you can disagree with me, including ideas of humility and non-ego. That wasn't meant to be a joke, but... in gender ideology, the mind, the subjective sense of self, of identity, is paramount. The mind becomes the transcendent, and the body as something to be transcended. The body, incidentally, in various cultures around the world, has often been associated with the feminine. as has the earth. I think that is because the seed is planted in the womb, the seed is planted in the earth. The darkness in the womb is the seed, is source of creativity as well. And on that note, 0 seconds, planting seeds.